Hi everyone. Today we are continuing with our transportation mini unit, talking about broader transportation systems. So remember yesterday we were talking about those transportation subsystems. Those are those parts of vehicles that we can kind of generalize. And today we're going to talk specifically about transportation systems and Boston area transportation. Just a couple of things to write down in your notebook today. I think most of you already know this, but transportation is ways of moving people from one place to another. So that can describe a lot of different things. Before we move on, I want you to pause the video and write down as many types of transportation as you can think of. So go ahead and pause here. All right, hopefully you got 5 or more on that. I'll show you the list that I came up with. Airplanes, boats, cars, trains, buses, bikes, feet, as in walking, and then there's plenty more, but those are the most common, I would say. Okay, so we're talking about this. This is part of the engineering unit because transportation systems, especially in cities, are highly engineered, and some of them are really old, so there's a lot of upgrading happening over time. There's an engineering, like the engineering problem is how do we move a lot of people at similar times as quickly as possible. So different types of transportation have different advantages and disadvantages. And these advantages and disadvantages happen kind of contextually. So for example, why don't we take a plane to school? It sounds kind of crazy because we would never do that. And the reason is that there's some big disadvantages of taking a plane. For example, it would be super expensive. It's hard to lift off and it's hard to land in the right place. And it just doesn't make sense for such a short distance. Similarly, why don't we walk to see our cousins in another state? I'm sure you can think of the disadvantages of that. All right, so another pause point here. You are going to, next to each of those transportation types that you wrote down earlier, write one advantage and one disadvantage of each one. Go ahead and pause. All right, hopefully you were able to come up with some advantages and disadvantages for each one. So now let's move specifically to the Boston area. So Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, even some of the suburbs that are further out. Of course, there's the T, right? That's our biggest public transportation infrastructure here. There's also a lot of buses. A lot of people drive cars individually or with other people. A lot of people walk, and some people bike, although not actually that many. All right, so I wanted to give you some numbers here. So Mr. Perez Luna is he is doing a grad school program that kind of involves some of this transportation stuff. So we're going to talk to him about that later today. And he got me some of these numbers. So in Boston and Cambridge, 37% of people drive alone to work. So they're just driving their car by themselves, and that's the biggest percentage. So that's what most people are doing to get to work. And this doesn't include students. This is specifically about 18 and over people going to work. 33% use public transportation, so that could be the T or buses. 17% walk. 6% carpool, which means that they're driving in a car with at least one other person. And then 3% bike. All right, so over the next couple of days, we'll be talking about how to improve Boston area transportation. And you're going to need to do a little bit of research in order to think about what needs to be improved. So you're going to start by asking a few people around you. This will happen right now. So if you're at school, this can be other students around you. It can be the adults in your room. It could be people at lunch or whatever. If you're at home, you can, if there's anybody else at home with you, you can ask them, or maybe you already know the answer if they're your family. Or you can text people or find the information somehow. So ask them these 3 questions. How do you get to school or work? Do you like the way you commute? And is there anything you wish were better about your commute? And just a reminder that word commute means travel to school or work. So it's a pretty specific word for this question. So how do you get to school or work? Do you like it? And is there anything you wish were better about your commute? So when we did this a couple of years ago, a lot of people's families were talking about how the traffic was really frustrating. And some students were also talking about how the T wasn't running often enough. So those are some of the things that they wanted to improve about transportation around Boston. All right, so you're going to jump into this right now. This is the end of the video, but you're going to take some notes on this because it will come up in the forum. So make sure that you're asking at least 3 people each of these 3 questions. It should just take a couple of minutes to do that. Make sure you're recording that in your notebook and then write the information into your Google form. See you in class.